Hi, this is Walter Weesey with Yellowstone Country Fly Fishing. No longer with Parks Fly Shop, and if you'd like more information about that, I'd be thrilled to offer it via email or phone call. Haven't done a fly tying video in quite some time, and I'm looking to get back into doing so. And so I decided, well, first off, I'm going to have kind of a video series here. I'm going to call it Montana Guide Flies, and I'm going to be doing just bugs that I use while guiding. Generally speaking, fairly simple to tie, durable, visible, all the things that you need on a guided trip to, have clients see the fly, and also just not to lose or use up too many, because time is money, and I'd rather not have to sit down and tie every night after my trips. But getting started here, I'm doing one that I can't believe I've never done, because this is my single most effective dry fly on the Yellowstone River, and it might be yours too. This is my purple hazy cripple. I call it a hazy cripple rather than a purple haze cripple, because there is a purple haze cripple already. Like a lot of my flies, I came up with this one because I was running out of purple haze parachutes, the more well-known pattern, and I had to come up with something that was faster to tie for the next morning. And lo and behold, I A/B'd this starting 15 years ago with the traditional purple haze, and it outfished it 3-1. I guarantee this fly will outfish a traditional purple haze 95% of the time. Tie in all sorts of colors. I have done a gray version, which is obviously a little bit more imitative of a mayfly. But by far the two most important colors are this one, which is the purple, and then the copper, which differs only in the body color. I use a copper material for the body, and then in the thread color I use orange thread to show through that copper. Otherwise it's exactly the same. I tend to fish the copper one on sunny days, the purple one on cloudy days. I probably have caught a fish on this fly in the Yellowstone region, if not in the Yellowstone region. Certainly in the Yellowstone region, I've caught a fish on it 12 months a year. In the Yellowstone River itself, I think I've caught a fish on it in every month except June, which, as many viewers will know, is runoff season when the river's high and muddy and small dry flies aren't the ticket. But tie a few of these up, try them in your local waters, either as an attractor or during a blueing olive hatch, and I'd be willing to bet these will rapidly become one of your favorite patterns. All right, to tie the purple hazy cripple, I've got a size 16 standard length dry fly hook in the vise, and if you have watched my videos before, or you'll learn, watching videos going forward, I don't get hung up on brand names. I don't get hung up on particular models of things. I try to provide alternatives. This is a Montana Fly Company hook, but it's the same as a TMCO or what have you, just a standard length dry fly hook. This fly is useful in sizes 12 through 20. Those larger sizes are good mostly in the little mountain creeks and things, using them as an attractor. I tend to fish the fly in the smaller sizes, 16 and 18, occasionally 20, although 20 is getting kind of small to be tying with a bunch of hackle and so on. But this one's a 16, and that's probably the most important size. Now my thread is going to be 8/0 purple uni. Again, don't get hung up on the particular thread. I'm gonna use whatever size. Some thread manufacturers, particularly Vivus is really a big one right now. Their thread is a lot bigger, and so I'd be using 10 or 12/0, maybe even 14/0 if I was using Vivus. But it doesn't matter, just purple thread and fairly fine. Now I lay down a small thread base there, about a third of the way back to the bend. Then I'm going to come in with my tail/shuck material, which is just golden brown Montana Fly Company Widow's Web. And again, you could use Zelon, you could use Congo hair, EP fibers, what have you. And the reason I did that small thread base there is I'm starting to establish the body taper. I don't, on the smaller size of this fly, I don't really taper it besides the under layers that I'm doing before I tie the materials in. Now in larger sizes, it doesn't matter as much. You don't have to be as careful on that. But anyhow, about a third of the way back from the eye here, I'm just going to take that in touching turns most of the way back, but not all the way back, because again, I'm trying to build a bit of a body taper here. And then I return that thread back to the initial tie-in point. And then my abdomen is going to be purple spandex, it's Spanflex, Life Flex, Sexy Floss. It's the same stuff you would use for legs on a Pat's rubber legs, or, well, I call them a girdle bug, but it's the same thing. I love this stuff, not just as legs, it's also great body material, and you'll see why in a second. And this is the same material that's used on the traditional purple haze. So I'm going to catch that in at that same point, and then start back towards the bend, and then as I'm going back, I'm going to start stretching that material pretty aggressively, and then I have to get in there and grab that shuck. But I'm going to keep stretching that all the way back to the bend here, and again, that kind of thins it out a little bit towards the back end there, and that's how I'm creating my body taper. And then bring my thread back forward. And then I like to trim the tail here pretty short, a little shorter than shank length, maybe 2/3 of the shank length, because it is mostly a shuck. So the tail is so far the only difference with a traditional purple haze, and you can see why that would be easier, because the traditional purple haze uses hair, and so I'm saving some time there, and adding some durability too. And then I threw on there some crazy glue, and I always try to add some glue underneath my fly bodies if it's at all feasible, because it creates a lot of additional durability. And as you can see here, I'm wrapping that material under tension and just in touching turns, and you can probably tell, yeah, you can tell already that creates almost like a buoyant style body, but it's much easier to work with, much more durable. All right, and then my wing post here on the fly is going to be white widow's web, again, EP fiber, Congo hair, what have you. You do want to use something that's hydrophobic on this, so poly yarn, essentially, because Antron is not water shedding, it's not hydrophobic. But I'm going to make a small thread base here, and then come back up about midway to the eye there, and then I'm going to again do touching turns back, slightly onto that body bump, actually, because I came a little too far forward with the body. And then I'm going to come in and trim that rear wing. That's the broken or emerging wing. And my hackles on this fly are going to be your standard Adams style hackle, which is a grizzly and a brown. And you can tie these in separately, or you can tie them in together. I tend to tie them in together. Just that way I'm sure they're kind of right next to each other and sort of oriented the same. I actually will often wrap the hackles together too, if they match up well. You can actually wrap two hackles at the same time. On the sample fly I did, when I did that, these wanted to break apart, so I'll wind up wrapping these separately. But if your hackles kind of mesh well, they kind of marry well, you can actually wrap those together, and again, that saves some time. So I came back up to where I tied in that wing, and I'm actually going to come in here and take a couple quick turns around the base of that wing before continuing to build my thread base up to the eye to stand that wing up a bit. This is what I would call a Rowan Nyman style cripple. Rowan Nyman's a tire out of West Yellowstone, I think, still. And he stands his cripple wings up, and that's where I got this idea. This is not a Quigley style where it's going straight out of the eye of the hook. I want it up so that the angler can see it. I'm tending to fish these things on fairly rough water where having a vertical wing is pretty important. But I'm going to go ahead and grab my grizzly hackle here, because I tied that in with the brown in front of the grizzly, and that's going to set me up to have a little bit more grizzly on this fly. And in fact, I forgot one step. I'm going to go ahead and lay down some super glue again. That's going to secure that wing, and it helps a little bit keep those hackles in there. So, it secures the butts of the hackles, and it actually will help. It'll get into the hackle slightly and adhere the hackle to the hook shank as well. But I'm going to do 1, 2, 3 turns of that grizzly behind the hackle, or behind the wing, 1 turn in front, and then on that next half turn I'll tie it off. And now I'm not going to trim that yet, just in case I screw up in it and it comes unraveled or something. I have to start over. But then I'm going to take my brown, and I like I said, I want a little bit less of the brown in here, and so I'm going to try to kind of work that back and forth. And when you're working your hackle back and forth like this, it actually fills in the gaps a little better without binding down too many fibers of the other hackle. And of course, if you do bind down any fibers, you can just free them with a toothbrush or what have you. And then when I get up to the eye there, I'm going to go ahead and trim those. I usually have a backdrop here. The camera's taking the place of my backdrop, so I can't really see what I'm doing there. Alright, and then I'm going to sweep everything back, bind down those fibers and make a small head, and then just do about a 3-turn whip finish here. And I've gone to using, particularly on smaller flies, less turns in my whip finishes because I'm going to glue the head there anyway. I use a lot of super glue in my fly tying, and find that works just as well. You know, I could use a glue knot and so on, but this is a slower setting super glue. It's almost like a lacquer rather than a true super glue. And so I don't use a glue knot, but I put glue on the knot. And I'm going to come in here, final step on this fly. I'm going to come in. Number one, I trimmed the wing there a little bit longer than the hackle, again, for visibility's sake. But I'm going to come in here, invert the fly, and I'm going to take a deep V-notch out of that hackle. I've got some strong opinions about how dry flies should float, and I think they should float low in the film even when they're buoyant like this. You know, the wing is going to provide buoyance, but that trimmed hackle is going to set it down in the film. And this style gets you almost as low as a parachute does with that trimmed hackle underneath, but it's much easier to tie and more durable because you're not wrapping it around the wing post. And then if you have any flyaways like this, I'm going to come in here and just trim a couple of those just to make it look prettier. To be honest with you, if this was a fly I was actually going to have a client use rather than one I was doing for a video, I probably wouldn't bother because the fish don't care. But, you know, I want it to look pretty for you guys. I bound down a few more than I intended here. But anyhow, there you have it. That's a purple hazy cripple, and tie those, use them. I've sold these things to people all over the country and beyond. They work great, and they'd see a lot less of these than they do with some similar smaller tractor dries. If you like the video, click thumbs up down below and subscribe. And you know, I am solo now. I'm not working for Parks Fly Shop, and so I'm just doing these for promotion of my own business. If you like the video and you're coming fishing out west, book a guided trip. I can also sell you some flies over the winter. I'm working on my website right now. I'm going to try to get an Etsy store or some other form of online store up over the winter to sell flies, possibly some materials. And then if there's a link in the bottom of of your screen that has a link to either PayPal or Buy Me a Coffee, I'd ask you, if you find this to be a useful fly, I'd ask you to spot me $1 on it. That's all I'm asking for is $1 from everybody who likes this video. And that would, frankly, it would let me get a better camera. It'd also let me buy a better boat next year. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you again. I'm going to try to do videos weekly moving forward.